Hi, good evening, and welcome to the meeting of the Town Meeting Study Committee. I'm Eric Moore. I am chair of the committee. We are here. I guess the first thing I should do is do roll. Let's see who's available online. Hi, Keith, I see you. But I would like to take roll from the committee. So just please call out here. Keith Bergman.
Present.
Thank you. Katie Bresnick, I see
Here.
you. Christy Haggerty,
There.
Alice Kaufman
Here.
here. Leslie Coppola, are you online? I do not see Leslie. Parashar, I see you, thank you. Phil Swain, hi. Eric Van Loon, are you available online? I do not see Eric Van Loon. And I'm Eric Moore, and I'm here as well. We don't call roll for the ex officio people, right? No,
You don't need to.
Well, I don't think you need to, we're
Okay.
on voting,
cool, thank you.
we're just random.
Yeah,
Just squatters.
well, thank you, Mark and Carmen for being here as well. So our agenda, I reordered the agenda a little bit because in working through the slides, I found that I felt this would be a better flow for us. So I haven't added or removed anything, but the order's changed a bit. I did want to start with public comment for up to 2 minutes for 20 minutes and up to 2 minutes per speaker. Do we have anybody from the public who would like to speak for up to 2 minutes? Please raise your hands.
You might have someone in the room.
I'm so happy to be silent to get introduced.
Let me just see if there's anybody online. If there's a hand being raised, I would see that, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Couple of things before you get going. I know last time you said we're gonna rotate note takers. Just
Oh, I'm
reminding
sorry,
who's
yeah.
taking notes, is that?
Raise my hand.
It's
Oh.
each time.
Oh, okay, thank you. I was gonna do it, but I'll send you an email on the workflow.
I mean, it would be, yeah, it would be great if it was somebody other than you,
Fair enough.
so that you could
Facilitate.
facilitate, yeah,
Oh, thank you.
thank you.
And I'll send you an email tomorrow morning, that Shannon and I worked out a workflow.
Okay,
So it's nice.
perfect, thank you.
Cool. Okay, I'll
Yeah.
recognize you,
My name's David Allen,
yeah,
Eastbridge Road 316. A known actor in
Thank
this
you.
space.
2 minutes,
You
please.
know, very much last night, it's just a question, I'm curious if you've enabled the Zoom AI companion, which would give you a disgustingly long summary, which will be filled with hallucinations, but it's, when I use it, at least, I got something to work from.
So strictly speaking, we're not responding, but, Shannon has turned that on and, I was surprised at what the quality was, for our first meeting. I think we'll have it available as well.
Thank you.
Good, thank you. That concludes public questions. Moving on. So late breaking news with our next item on the agenda is the ballot advisory questions. Late breaking news as of about 5:30 this afternoon. It turns out that the public opinion advisory questions do not go on a special election ballot. So they're just off the menu altogether. There's something that we weren't aware of in terms of the approvals process. Somebody caught it and in time. So there won't be a public opinion advisory question from us in June.
May I interject?
Yeah.
The general rule is what can go on a ballot in terms, what a town can put on a ballot has to find specific authorization in a state statute somewhere. And they're not uncomplicated, the state statutes. So things that are okay in a general election may not be okay in a special election. Then, things in a general election might be okay, but not when there's a state election. So, and it isn't always obvious in the first instance, whether we can do what it is that we would like to do. It's a little bit Byzantine. So,
Well, hopefully those questions can be useful for a future potential survey, and thanks to you both for reviewing the wording, I'm sure in a lot of depth. in advance of this new news.
Fair enough, thank you.
And just to clarify, to be grounded in a state statute, what does that mean?
They need the specific authority to put something on a ballot has to be granted to us by the general court.
Oh, boy.
And so, either we have it or we don't. And, there's nothing in the Constitution that I'm aware of. It's all in state statute, what we're allowed to do for our local elections. And, so.
Thank you. Sorry, Kristen?
One of my thoughts about this, and I wasn't here last time, I'm Kristen, I haven't met you
I'm
yet.
Phil.
Nice to meet you. I am glad that they won't be on the ballot because I think it's confusing. However, I understand that you want to gather input early. And so one process question was, if, are you able to, if it's not on the ballot, can it still go out with a mailing? Like, can a QR code go? Where you send the people to a survey? Because then it's not a ballot. If you have people coming in to cast their ballots, on their way in or something, it's like, hey, there's this QR code if you want to, take these 3 questions, then it's very clear that they're not binding, it's not ballot, it's just advisory.
That's another interesting question because, there's a lot of, campaign rules.
Okay.
In terms of what you can distribute within the polling place, so. I don't know if you could distribute that sort of thing within the polling place, but you might be able to distribute it outside. And I don't know how many feet from the door you would have to be.
Okay, and technically, that's fine. I would prefer that we don't put those questions right now in this month as they are written, but that's for other discussion. I was just kind of curious about process, though. That's helpful.
Good, thank you. Moving on.
Eric, I just wanted to let you know that Leslie is on Zoom.
Oh, cool. Leslie, thank you for joining. Yeah, let's see her then.
I see her on the list.
I see that I already missed something on the agenda, which is just to approve our minutes. What do we recommend for procedure for approving minutes? Do we need to vote on it? Can I make a motion to approve minutes as written?
Can the chair
Uh,
make the motion?
Yeah,
So-
I will move
Yeah.
to approve the minutes as written.
Okay,
Second.
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 Now, because we're a hybrid meeting, do we need to take a vote proper?
Well, first you want to ask if there's any discussion.
Any discussion?
It's a great format and we should adopt it townwide.
So shall we vote now? As a hybrid meeting? Okay, so may we vote? Let's just go through the list.
Can you just tally everybody that's here and then just go through the 3 that are on?
He actually has to do a roll call under the state statute on.
Oh,
hybrid
really?
meetings.
Yeah.
Although you don't have to do it, the clerk for the meeting can do it.
So do you want me to roll it? All off
If
names?
you wish, I've got a list of names here, so,
Yes,
yeah.
so Keith,
Aye.
Katie,
I,
Kristen,
Hi,
Alice,
Aye.
Leslie is remote, Leslie,
Aye.
Eric,
Aye,
Rosser, I, Phil,
Yes,
approved. I don't think Eric is on yet, right?
right, correct.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Next item on the agenda is to discuss impressions from the 2024 annual town meeting survey. So these are just impressions. I think we all got the results from the survey in the packet. Just my quick takeaways to raise them here. We had about 100 responses, a little bit less, out of about 1,000, a little over 1,000 people. What was interesting to me was that there seemed to be an even response split between the people who are regulars at town meeting and then the folks who appear to be issue driven, coming on for some specific thing. I question, how much of town meeting is relevant for your deliberation? About half found it to be relevant, but 40%, my mind is already made up. 80% found opposing perspectives valuable. That was interesting. 50% learned something new, 50% maybe not. 40% said they were well informed before. And then there's a wide variety of information sources that people drew on for learning about material in town meeting. That was a really high level. Again, it's a small group of responses, right? So I would say that this is more indicative than conclusive. Did we have any discussion? Any other comments about the survey?
I read through the comments section other, and I thought there were some maybe important themes that we could take from those comments. One of which that stuck out to me is a couple people mentioning speaking times, where 2 minutes, maybe given the length of the meeting, we could consider whether 2 minutes, we could reduce the time. I'm not sure if there are any regulations surrounding that length of time for speaking, but that could be a way to shorten the meeting and make people make more succinct points in that venue.
Good, thank you.
So the other good thing I noted was the information sources, right? The bridge seemed to be quite a bit attending other meetings folks weren't really doing, so I kind of found that interesting. And then also speaking with neighbors seemed to be another one that sort of
Yeah.
struck out, neighbors and friends, in terms of sources of information. We probably ought to consider that as we think about communication.
Totally,
Yeah.
yeah. Other comments, observations? I think in terms of looking ahead, yeah, I'd like to spend more time with that data. One thing I'd like to do is to partition the responses by the regulars and the issue people and see if there's a difference in pattern in terms of the responses or information sources or anything else like that, because it's really two different, perhaps two different subpopulations within the pool. And then, yeah, the open responses were interesting. We're not necessarily kind in our responses, which is always information. But I think to look at that more carefully would surface some things as well, just in terms of any potential patterns.
A quick comment. Well, looking at this is really helpful. We all already acknowledged it's a sample size of 100 of people who attended town meeting this year.
Yeah,
Far more people didn't attend town meeting. Or didn't, this was a really good year for turnout of town meeting. We had over 1,100 people on the first night. We don't have responses from the people who didn't go to town meeting. We have other people talking for them. People like me who have kids and can't go to work but that we don't have, and how to reach that is going to be a part of our challenge of how we talk to and engage people who don't come to town meeting, whether they're regulars or issue driven. What keeps them from coming? We have to be mindful of that in our work ahead.
absolutely.
Yeah, I think that really gets to communication. And I think that's something that we can really focus on and work on is how do we reach these people? What are the sources like the bridge, for example, and making it clear that we want opinions from people who are not necessarily attending and what makes it easier for them. So we'll have to think carefully about that. Anyway, sorry I interrupted you.
No, we didn't.
I will just say one thing, thank God for the bridge.
Yeah.
If it was just the Concord Journal we were relying on, there would be no source of information.
Yeah.
So Eric, you put together some fabulous comprehensive information that's been really helpful. And I know we're gonna, get more to that. I guess my question, and again, I wasn't at the first meeting and I did read the minutes and thank you, everybody, but when I hear, looking at survey data, when I hear, communication, things like that, I fear that we're putting the cart before the horse. And, the charge is to, or this committee's charge is to make town meeting more inclusive, effective, and responsive to the needs and desires of the town. And so I would propose that we qualify that at the beginning of this and say, what does it mean? What do we mean by inclusive? Are we looking at certain populations? Are we trying to have a larger number of people? Are we trying to have different demographics or what is it?
Yeah.
That we mean by inclusive? What do we mean by effective, responsive? I think we can, detail that a little bit, but I would encourage this group to define that at the very beginning, then how we're going to evaluate that, but then get the buy-in from the town on that and say, yes, we do want your recommendations on these things, because my concern is, and I read the 1996 stuff, and I wrote down the 21 recommendations, the problems that they had, and the 21 recommendations that they had to go with them. And they're largely similar to what we're hearing now.
Yeah.
So, I want to make sure we're not just kind of saying, well, let's try this, or let's try this, instead
Yeah.
of saying, this is the problem, this is either what we tried in the past, and this is what's working or not. So that's, you know, I know you had that kind of in your slides, but I wanted to see, is there an opportunity to really define inclusive and, effective, especially at an early part?
Good.
Keith also has hand raised.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. Keith, yes, please.
Yes, thanks very much. It's Keith Bergman. And I want to associate myself with the previous comment. I think it would be very helpful for us to look at how we're going to approach our work. For me, and one of the reasons I volunteered for the committee is I'm a process person. I'm concerned about voter information. For 37 years, it was my responsibility as a town manager or town administrator to provide make sure all the information was provided to the voters at our open town meetings. And I've got, you know, I'm waiting for the opportunity to share it, but I have a list of particular suggestions to offer about how we might want to revise the process by which information is made available for the voters prior to town meeting, and even how we conduct town meeting to have more time to debate items that town meeting wants to debate. You know, if we find ourselves dividing into subcommittees to look at things, I'd love to be on a process group that maybe others would want to look at how you expand the participation at town meeting by, you know, with clickers or with other, you know, the timing of the date of town meeting and other accommodations. For me, I think I could be of best help looking at the voter information and the process of getting it. Thanks.
Good, thank you, Keith. Good, thank you. Yeah, I think we will. Moving on to the next item on the agenda. So this is a little bit conceptual. I apologize for this. I think as as I try to think through things, I use a lot of frameworks and thinking through. So just to say that looking at our work together as a project, right, a thing that we have to deliver things for, you know, we're hey Eric. Hey there. You know, there's stuff we need to produce. We're gonna inform it through research. We're gonna put our heads together and synthesize. And we have different customers, as it were, for the work. You know, there's our community, our voters, our residents, other boards, town staff, and the select board and moderator. And so if you think about, you know, this is a kind of a consulting project, very high level. This is the stuff that we need to think about. And I think, and we're gonna come back and talk in much more detail about how we're gonna work together. But, you know, I think the things that stand out for me, and I wanted to say this here to kind of frame our discussion a little bit later, is, you know, we need to organize in terms of what we're gonna pay attention to, you know. I think we have a lot to do. We're a large group, and how do we work in parallel? And I think the pattern of doing research and then reporting in, you know, I don't want us to sort of wait until November to sort of make our recommendations. I think how we can work incrementally and synthesize is going to be really important for us. And, you know, I think we have no authority, which in a way is great because it means that our rationales need to be explicit in order to have any credibility and influence. So I just, you know, we can't ignore that, but we have to remember it. Kristen, I wanted to use a comment from you that early on, I think getting buy-in about the problems we're trying to solve early in the process will help us and residents to be more objectively evaluate potential solutions, which just speaks to, it's what you said earlier, but it speaks to what you just said. I think we want to get the big questions and the big framing early, so we know why we're doing what we're doing. And we have a lot to do. There's a tight schedule. I wanted to sort of raise up some things that look like dates to me, in terms of timeline. These are squishy. So we're gonna come to this in the agenda, but the select board will make a recommendation. We'll make a decision about when to schedule town meeting next year, sometime in June. We have an opportunity, we'll talk about it, to try to influence that or recommend something. Late November, by late November, we want to know specifically what warrant articles we'd like to have for town meeting 25. I think it's by late November as well, process changes that we would like to see instituted for town meeting 25 should be pretty clear, because what happens between the warrant and town meeting is a lot. I have just a small sense of it. Carmen is a very big sense of it. So I think, ideas around that should be specified pretty early, in part because that way we can validate them with people who know. The select board will begin composing and ordering the warrant in December. By March, it would be good if our report was done, and even before then, we're actively communicating with the town about our recommendations. That it's far away, but it's soon as well. And I think, again, I think if we wait until May or, to report out to the town what we found, what we recommend, it's way too late. In a way, what the town hears at town meeting in May should be pretty familiar by then, and that would be a goal for us. So just in terms of talking about dates, as it were.
Do process changes have to go to town on the warrant?
No,
Right.
well,
So, they're not affected by date. Some of that work, if we choose
Yeah.
a process, it's
Yeah.
irrelevant to
Yeah.
the conversation.
most, is there any process change that would have? There could be some process changes that would have to go on the warrant. So for example, the finance committee has some programmatic deadlines that are prescribed by town meeting. And so if one wanted to change any of those, you would want to go back to town meeting to change them. The service of the warrant, notice of the warrant to the town is in a bylaw. And if there were any reason you wanted to change that, you would need to go back to town meeting. The circulation of the finance committee report is, I don't know where that is. It's either a policy or a bylaw, but it definitely has been touched by town meeting. And so if we were going to change anything there, you would want to go back.
For changing dates,
town
changing
meeting.
process within town meeting, reordering the way the warrant is put together would not necessarily require. town meeting.
So, we have a whole lot of process, so we start off with this town meeting preview meeting. That's not prescribed anywhere. That happens in
Mhm.
December. Typically, it happens in parallel with opening the warrant. That's not in a bylaw, it's not in a policy, it's just a thing we've done
Mhm.
for the last 30 years. And it's had different purposes over time. We open the warrant and keep it open for a month. That's not written down anywhere either. And there is nothing in state law or town bylaw that says we have to do that. And different towns do it differently. There are towns who don't post the warrant until much later in the process. We post it really early because we want to fix it in terms of what people are going to be asked to talk about. And then we have this whole hearing process of 5 hearings. We are unique in these 5 hearings. Most towns do not have a public hearing on every single article that's on the warrant. Planning board must have a hearing on its articles. I think the Community Preservation Committee has to have hearings, but most of all the other hearings, we don't have to, the charter provides that the Finance Committee has to have a hearing. But all our other hearings, we just do those, and they're not in a bylaw, they're not in a written policy. They are things that we have done as long as most people who live here can remember. And the spacing of them has been kind of the same for
Mhm.
20 or 30 years. There's been discussion back and forth about what the use of those hearings
Mhm.
should be. Should there really be full-fledged discussion? Or is that like having town meeting twice? Should it be something different? Should there be time limits? Should people have their motions ready? Is that a forum for people to put out their whole presentation and get reactions to the presentation so they can refine it and improve it and get something that is more collectively acceptable to the town in terms of whatever that proposal is? A lot of different ways to think about what those
Mhm.
hearings are for.
Mhm.
And then the finance committee has changed what it does with its report and how it is ordered and what else is in there besides the finance committee's report and recommendations, because for a number of years, it's been used because it goes to everybody's house. It's been used as a vehicle to toss some other stuff in there, like, we're gonna give you the warrant again. We're gonna give you the select board recommendations. We're gonna put the consent calendar in there. And if there's a draft bylaw that didn't make it into the warrant because it wasn't ready, we're gonna put that in there. So, you know, how we use that, and that's not written down anywhere either.
Mhm.
And then town meeting traditions and procedures has some stuff written down. You know, our guide at the meeting is town meeting time, which is about to come out in the 4th edition. But that's our general guide. We have local permutations on town meeting time that are in our town meeting traditions and procedures. Those don't have the force of law. They aren't adopted as bylaws. They aren't part of state law. They are our traditions and procedures, which
Mhm.
this, you know, any court interpreting what's happened at town meeting would give deference to those as established procedures. And if you've done what you usually do, there's kind of a presumption of regularity and acceptability to whatever it is that happened at town meeting that might be being challenged. And then there's a bunch of stuff that happens after town meeting, including what the select board might have tossed in its lap in terms of things that have to go to the legislature, policies that it's being asked to enact. Things might be tossed in the finance committee's lap in terms of things it's being asked to do. Any bylaw that's enacted by the town goes to the Attorney General's office. It gets reviewed and then it comes back. The town clerk's involved in all that. It comes back and then things become effective at later dates. And depending on what we've done, that might impact what the assessors are doing in terms of, say, the senior means tested property tax exemption. It affects everybody applying for a building permit, if zoning laws have changed and, you know, when that happens and when you're applying for your, and that's pretty much it until we get to the next cycle. And as soon as we finish that cycle, you know, like, for example, our bylaws, they may have been submitted to the Attorney General by now. I expect they probably have. Certified votes from the town clerk's office have to go to the Attorney General's office. And then, and in this particular cycle, we have some other state agencies who are looking at things that we did also. So there are multiple approvals that have to happen on some of our things. And then there's like a watching that happens to things we sent to the legislature that we're asking them to act on. And I will shut up now. I'm sorry, but that's the,
Yeah.
you know, there's a lot of process. There's tons and tons of process and, all of it pretty much all of it can be changed to better suit our needs, in whatever way we think they should be changed.
Thank you. I think, she did all that.
He's waiting for the AI.
Yeah,
He's waiting for the AI. The AI summary.
Yeah, so I think, for us to look at, and I think it sort of speaks to what Keith was talking about. For us to look at the meetings the warrant review meetings, and the other review meetings, in that period between the opening of the warrant and town meeting. To look at, I think, I was also thinking about the moderators meeting, which I don't really know anything about. You don't need to explain it right now. But you know, how it is that you work with people who will be presenting at town meeting. And that timeline, I think, is also, outcomes that we get for presentations at town meeting are sensitive to that process as well. You know, the public's understanding of the issues in front of town meeting could be more sensitive to what happens in the hearings or not. So it's stuff that I'd like us to be able to pay attention to in some form. Yeah, thank you.
So one thing I was thinking of is, and it came up in the comments people did, as well as just talking to folks and some of the comments at ETM. There's an expectation that folks are supposed to follow the various hearings and meetings of the finance committee and the school board and the select board. I'm curious whether we should think about making some recommendations to some of those key bodies
Yeah,
for them to put out a little bit of a preview year-end summary for folks.
yeah,
We at the finance committee try to do that in our report and we've changed it.
yeah,
I don't know whether other committees do that.
yeah.
And it may be something for us to think about is how do we get those summaries into the hands of voters also?
Yeah, it's a real interesting intuition. Yeah. I'm gonna keep going. So next item on the agenda, is, and this will be a question for us to make a decision about tonight. So as I was alluding to, the select board, will make a decision about, we'll begin to negotiate with the school team about when to have town meeting next year. I know that, so some of those conversations are happening already. You know, looking at the feedback that we've seen even 30 years ago from town meeting, we know that citizens complain that town meeting is too long, that weeknights are hard. And we have an opportunity, quote unquote, as a committee to choose to undertake a recommendation to the select board for the timing of town meeting for next year. That would simply be a recommendation. I think that, Keith, is your hand up? I'll come back to you, okay? It would be a recommendation. It would take some effort on our part. I think our next meeting, the 2 meetings, would really be focused on this question of trying to understand and make a recommendation. So it's a choice about how we spend our time in June. You know, there's an opportunity cost as well, right? So that's the question that I'd like to put forward to us is, do we want to tackle this question? I think, you know, and just to look at it in terms of nuts and bolts, I mean, you know, if I were just to say, you know, why don't we do this, right? Town meeting sessions are too long and too late, and too many of them. People turn out more for high interest articles. Weeknights for meetings are hard for some. Why not schedule highest interest articles specifically on the day that's easiest for people to attend? And you know, the day that's easiest for people to attend could be Saturday. There's, you know, issues there. Could be Sunday afternoon, could be issues there. It could still be weekdays. So if we want to, do we want to tackle this question over the next 2 meetings?
Maybe I'll let Keith go first since he's
Yeah.
had his hand raised.
Yeah, thanks. I think it would be great to discuss these issues for the next couple of meetings. I think that we have a window of opportunity to talk about some process changes. If town meeting is going to be in next June, I think that we ought to look at pushing the whole schedule back. I mean, in order to, you know, to do the 1st of May, if we're now talking about sometime into June, I think we ought to use that additional month to get ourselves ready, so that the warrant's not closing in January, for example, but maybe in February. Just something to think about, because we do it far too long in advance anyway. Close the warrant, and then we wait, we don't see motions until we walk into town meeting. and there's plenty of opportunity for connecting some of the dots here, seeing what we have for, voter information. One of the ideas that I had shared with the moderator was when I was town administrator in Littleton, and I should mention, was also when Concord's chief financial officer, Anthony Ansaldi, who's on staff now in Concord, he was my assistant town administrator. We followed the recommendations of a study committee to increase voter participation by having a single comprehensive document mailed out to all households at least 2 weeks before town meeting, which had the text of the warrant articles, the motions for the articles, an explanation in plain English, which we're sort of doing now, the fiscal impact of each article, recommendations by any town boards that had, whether it's natural resources on a open space matter or the select board or anyone, and included the finance committee's annual report. So that when we moved the discussion from one article to the next, all you had to do was turn the page. You didn't have to suddenly juggle the FinCom book on your left knee and the warrant on your right knee, and figuring out where the motions are that you were just handed, that the information was all there. And if you need to, and obviously there are some things that won't get resolved till the last minute, then you issue a one page update as people get to town meeting with some changes. So there's just there's a lot of, but doing that requires unanimity and agreement and enforcement by the administration on here are the deadlines, here's where we need the information. And we're going to ensure that you get it by establishing, achievable deadlines for, and I'm particularly hung up on motions. Town council is asked to do motions in January and we don't see them until April. Those motions, any article sponsor should be capable of producing their motion at the time they produce their article. Very little changes over the course of a hearing. But anyway, those are just I'm unloading or downloading. So thanks. Thank you.
Thank you, Keith. We'll come back to that, not tonight, but I think it's an interesting question. Let's start with Mark.
Quickly, we're talking about May, I think, as a possible, in other words, moving from May all the way back to June? Really? Okay.
I have, I tried to make a draft calendar this afternoon, so no one has looked at it yet. I sent it to Carmen, but I feel like after Carmen takes a look at it, I would be happy to send it to you guys. But I don't think it's ready to be discussed at this point.
Right,
Yeah.
and if I just might
Okay.
respond to Mark, we had hoped to be
Yeah.
looking at May. And basically, the information we have from the schools is that there isn't a good 3-day period during the whole month
Right.
for us to completely disrupt the high school.
So what's come to my mind about this is sort of two concepts. One is, this is an unusual year, and we had better be careful about drawing too many conclusions or trying to, because we're gonna have to adjust the calendars. So if we're trying to solve town meeting in general, applying that solution to this year may be completely impractical. That's kind of the first thought. The other one, I think, which also is closely related, is there's a huge event that's gonna disrupt everybody's calendar this year. The 250th is gonna suck all the oxygen out of the room. And the result of that is, we're effectively losing a week or even 2 weeks out of the spring, which means that every other event that anybody schedules annually is going to try to move and adjust, and there's going to be all of these collisions amongst scheduling that we can't even really anticipate when we start talking about this year. So I kind of I kind of think that thinking about procedures, thinking about some of the suggestions that Keith was just making about the documents, the ways to make it more effective. Those are useful, and trying to rig the schedule, especially going into this year, may be really unlikely to succeed.
Okay, we had a bunch of hands up, so what I'm gonna do is simply go around. Eric, we'll start with you.
First, my apologies to everyone. I was here 12 minutes early, except, I'm sorry, I was marching to the beat of a different drum. I'll do my best to show up 12 minutes from the actual start time, so apologies.
Okay.
Second, I think the immediate question before us is whether we take, in Eric's characterization, the next two meetings to talk about what the timing of town meeting 2025 should be. And my view is we have a lot of big questions. We've got very limited time. We're not a town meeting advisory committee. We're a study committee for bigger picture, long term. And I don't think we have any particular experience, background, whatever, to have special input right now into when it should be for 2025, and especially with breaking news like Carmen just reported, as she had said in her email. You know, if the school committee said, or if the schools can't be available, I mean, there's so many other things. I think my view would be we should punt on that and go to the more basics of what we know we do need to wrestle with.
Good, thank you. Alice, skip you, we'll come to you last, all right?
Yeah.
Okay. Kristen, please.
I agree, Eric. I think we should take kind of a longer term view and not need to make immediate recommendations. Just a little more studied recommendations in terms of, you know, why we need to look at, or town meeting is too long. Well, so what does that matter? That kind of thing. So I would say no need to immediately comment about 2025.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, I agree. The two meetings is 1 month. We don't have a month to talk about 2025. Let other folks figure it out. Give us the date, but we tackle the bigger issues.
Okay, good, thank you.
First, I wanted to say, I appreciate Kristen's comment earlier about defining what our actual objectives are, and like what the goals are, what we're trying to do. But on the opposite note, I kind of feel differently than the group. I think it might be useful if we could come up, maybe not use the whole month, but some recommendations to show some improvement for next year. I think it will show that our committee is making contributions, maybe start to engage more people, and maybe given the complexity of the calendar, maybe it means something like seeing how we can limit it to 2 nights. Maybe it's 1 night a week for 3 weeks. That's maybe easier to schedule at the high school. So something even small that we could do to make it easier for folks to attend, but not take up a ton of time doing that, which may be difficult.
Good, thank you.
Right, so I agree, but I don't want to just parrot everything, because I actually have a slightly different version of Shannon's suggestion. I don't think the 9 of us should be discussing scheduling next year's town meeting. It's just, you can't do that, leave that to the experts. But we might be able to make a recommendation in the next 2 weeks or 2 meetings on some general principles that we think would be the schedulers should consider. A weekend meeting, and I think it's too big to recommend just 2 days now, but something in general. But yes, someday, maybe 2 days might be a recommendation too. But for now, we could vote to recommend that the schedulers should consider a weekend day or something else general like that, or 3 consecutive weeks. That kind of general principle.
We would need to think about it. We need to talk about that and think about it.
Yes,
Think
yeah.
about it and talk about it, yeah.
Yeah, but if you're talking about the schedule, that's something we could do, and we could actually make a recommendation in the next couple of meetings. Within the next
Thank
couple.
you. I want to come back to you. I want to go to, hey, Leslie, I don't know if you wanted to comment on this.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Yeah, I guess I would agree with the folks that say setting the calendar itself might not be something that we have the time to do and the bandwidth, but making some general suggestions, I agree, is a great idea.
Okay, thank you. Alex?
Well, I think everything I had in mind have been aired, so I don't need to repeat them. They're all on the table.
Good, thank you. Asha?
So, the notion of making general recommendations sounds good, but I would want us to tackle, what are we here for, what, that first, frankly, because
What problem? are
unless
trying
we
to solve?
understand what we want to solve, how we're gonna measure it,
Mhm.
it seems to be making recommendations
Right.
before that,
That's
doesn't
what
make a
we're
lot of sense. I would recommend next meeting, we just tackle that
Mhm.
and devote as much time as we need to those principles.
Good.
And then
okay.
maybe we can feed in some general recommendations if the
Okay.
timing allows with 2025.
Okay. Cool. So thank you, everyone. I think, I just have a question. So the status quo right now is Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday night. And presumably with no suggestions from us, you know, no different thinking, we'd see it again for next year. If we were interested in the prospect of a Sunday afternoon town meeting, how would that normally be considered by the select board and in conjunction with your recommendation?
The select board makes the decision on
Yeah.
when town meeting would be scheduled. And in the past, the select board looked at recommendations from the last town meeting study committee. They also, I think we had some town meeting surveys that had some
Yeah.
questions about scheduling. And they always do consult with the schools, the schools are 70% or more of the budget that gets appropriated by town meeting. They clearly have an interest in that process going well and people being able to participate. And after the first 2 Sunday meetings that we had, the reaction of the school committee was, we didn't like what happened, there weren't enough people, or there were particular things that had happened. I think in one year, there was an amendment to remove the amount of the legal budget from the school budget as a protest vote, basically, over who the schools were hiring as their legal counsel, because people felt that they were paying too much an hour compared to what the town was paying. And so they just took that number out of the school budget, and it passed. And I think there was a feeling by the school committee that had that not been on a Sunday afternoon, there would have been more parents there, and that might not have happened, because obviously the schools town meeting cannot tell on a line item basis what the schools what to do with their money. So if you just tell them they got $200,000 less, they have to take it out of somewhere.
Right.
And if they aren't willing to take it out of the legal budget, or they feel they can't because they have a contract or whatever, then they gotta take it from somewhere else, and that puts them in a difficult position.
Well, I do remember that specific situation. I was, one of my bugaboos for the finance committee and the schools was hiring lawyers. Corporate lawyers who do gigantic finance projects for thousands of dollars an hour to advise on, hedging and other very routine school matters, and charging $1,100 an hour for that kind of advice. So what they did was, in that circumstance, they took money out of OPEB, and they just continued to pay the law firm $1,100 an hour.
But I think what I'm hearing you say is that the select board makes the decision on when the town meeting is. However, it seems like it's, I want to use the right words here. It's in collaboration with the school committee.
Yes.
But
And the town manager and town
Yes.
staff and the town moderator.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
Eric was part of the mix when we tried the Sunday experiments, and
And so we don't have to decide that now. I think it's more of understanding, what parties are involved in making that decision, and does somebody have the final say? Like what I almost heard you say is that the school committee has the final say. which doesn't seem like that should be the case, but they're hosting, and so maybe, you know, part of what we look at is.
Okay, so let me be clear though. I mean, the superintendent has been very clear that we will make work whatever the town tells us we have to make work.
Right.
But it's gonna be really hard for us. And so, you know, that's part of the calculus for the select board in making a choice. Do we wanna really make their lives hard by taking the auditorium away when they need to practice for the spring musical, or you know, and so it's not easy. It's not easy.
Yeah.
And they were at, you know, I mean, we're all trying to accommodate each other, and it just happens that that's the space in town that is the largest and the easiest for us to use. But it wasn't built for town meeting, it was built to be an educational institution for high school kids.
So
So
where
So-
the town meeting used to be hosted?
it's been in various places. It was in the Armory. There
Okay.
used to be a giant auditorium in an old, there was a, it's a
Insurance.
nursing home
Insurance,
now,
yeah,
but it was
insurance.
it was a Catholic school. And when it stopped being a Catholic school, the building still had this giant auditorium, and I remember town meeting being there a couple of times,
I
right?
remember
Yeah.
that.
So if we were to look at schedule, then that might be a variable that we
Yeah.
look at, is if
Other
there's a
locations.
limitation.
So I'm hearing a lot of things, sorry, Katie.
Yeah, I'm just curious how long ago this event where the school committee vote didn't, or the school budget vote didn't happen, or wasn't the result the school wanted?
2015 is my guess. What do you think?
I was moderator then.
So,
Probably, yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like
We were trying to try different things.
yeah,
And I think we can get too much in the weeds on what happened with a specific
absolutely.
something.
yeah,
I mean, that particular thing was
Yeah, I was just curious
unusual,
if,
unexpected.
like, the context has changed in terms of like how people are living from pre-COVID to
Yeah.
post-COVID, and
And
maybe yes, maybe
absolutely.
no, but something to think about.
so
For sure.
I feel like, it's a little bit of a complicated question, right? I think, you know, the intuition that, oh, Sunday afternoons would be easier for parents to come is not borne out by experience, and even that makes it a complicated thing to consider. The sentiment around the table seems like we shouldn't tackle this right now. I don't know if we need to take a vote on this, but I'm not hearing a sense that we should really commit to making a recommendation at this point.
Well, I think that exploring the results of previous efforts and stuff like that informs us in a way, and you know, my experience is from 6 years on the finance committee and then 8 years really, you know, helping to coordinate town meetings, is that there's a remarkable and varied number of things that nudge town meeting one way or the other. You know, I seem to recall that when we were in the process of building the new high school, we had to make some adjustments by maybe a matter of a week or two this way or that, because they were about to demolish the building, or or we couldn't get in, or the parking lot wasn't finished, and you know, it's just, and then, of course, there's the experiment on the field because it was COVID, so it's a little bit of a, you know, traveling circus of things that in any
No, I
given
do
year
object to
affect
that
this
conversation.
affect the schedule.
True.
And they're all useful and interesting as anecdotes, but you know, I think somehow or another, our responsibility here is to sort of tease out
Mhm.
you know, what are the underlying principles that would be helpful? Returning to Kristen's question, I think that it's about participation and turnout.
Mhm.
You know, if we
Just
had
the
to.
sheer number.
Yeah, if
Okay.
we had to actually ask ourselves, what's the driving question here? It's the sense that not enough people are able to be involved. One way or the other, and that's the key thing to do. I'll just add this little coda to that. When we started the Warner's Pond Task Force, which is also dealing with a kind of a difficult question, you know, what do you mean by Warner's Pond sort of thing? We did a brief exercise with that facilitator of everybody writing down what a headline in the bridge might look like that represented success or their outcome from this. And that was an interesting way of sort of getting at what do we think we're really aiming towards here? And, you know, that could be something that we could try, or just framing that verbally. It's useful.
Good. hold that thought.
Yeah.
On this question of do we commit to developing a recommendation for town meeting next year? Again, my sense of the room and online is that, not yet.
I'm still interested in if there is, we get to a point where the schedule hasn't been set. And we do have something that could achieve the goals that we've set out as a group, something small that we could implement for that time. I am interested in making a recommendation at that time. But if we're not at the point where we have that information, then we're not there.
Okay.
I would just say to preclude valuable discussion among this group. By jumping to something to make it to a deadline for this town meeting.
Good, I agree. So, yeah. So my opinion.
But if I may, to Katie's point,
Yeah.
you certainly, this committee certainly has an opportunity to influence the process as it unfolds for town meeting, regardless of the date that it's set on. Because, you know, the only thing that's set in the warrant is, you know, what the articles are, where the meeting's gonna be, and what day it's gonna start. And, that's it. And the rest of the process, to the extent it's not written, to the extent we aren't stuck with it because it's in a bylaw or it's in the charter or somewhere else. We are open to recommendations from this committee, which could be implemented for 2025 annual town meeting.
I'm forcing that as well. So if we learn something, right, in the next few weeks, there's nothing stopping us from communicating that. It wouldn't necessarily be a recommendation from the committee, but it would be something that we learned that we could communicate.
Yeah, I think it'd just be useful to show some meaningful change for
Yeah.
next year. Things usually take a really long time to
Yeah.
change. So if we can show positive impact within a year, I think that's reasonable to suggest that we have
Yeah.
some sort of goal like that.
Good.
Could I add something? I just want to make everyone aware that the select board dates for June are June 3rd, which is next Monday, and June 17th. So I think June 17th is probably the date that the select board is gonna finalize their calendar. So I feel like that probably only gives this group one more meeting to mull over
Yeah.
things.
Yeah, good, thank you. So I think we're gonna move on. All right, thank you.
Mark Martinez, I think, has his hand raised on Zoom if you're taking public comment.
I'm sorry, Mark, we've moved past the public comment period. I did get your email today and we're gonna commit to following up with you. But it won't happen tonight within the frame of this meeting, sorry. Okay, moving forward. Again, some more conceptual stuff from me. So I think, you know, we have an interest in getting to sort of what the underlying problems are and challenges that are really going on with town meeting. And my framing was to say that town meeting exists in both the civic context, the policy making of the town, by the town, for the town, and the civil context, the lives that we're all living as residents and voters. And that the things that we think about with respect to town meeting live in that intersection. And that the work of this committee is identifying problems to solve, generating and validating ideas. And the validating of ideas is, what if we do this, right? What if we have town meeting on Sunday, right? Or whatever, right? What are the outcomes from that in terms of also, you know, the operational consequences as well? And then what's best? What's the best thing to do for what we're trying to do? I'm a systems person, so I like thinking that way. I think part of, you know, the way that we can approach this is to look at the different roles in and around our local policy making, which is administrative, the folks on boards, the volunteers on boards, town staff, those professionals. You know, we're in the container of the state laws, and we develop bylaws for the town. And, you know, in the civil community, it's also our volunteers on boards, but significantly the public and the voters. And so, again, looking at these different sets of interests and how they come into play and what we can and can't do with town meeting, to me is where a kind of a big picture framing lives. So, So, and one more slide on this, going really fast, just, so if we look at the, the voters' interactions throughout town meeting, it's really, with different town boards, it's with town meeting itself, artifacts of like the warrant, the town website, these civic processes, what I read in the bridge, and what my neighbors say, all these things sort of go into the voters' sort of information sphere, for lack of a better phrase. And, they also bring, obviously, they bring their civil concerns, my commitments at home, what my values are, and so on. And so to think about how to make the system of town meeting work better, to me, really involves getting into the experiences of voters in a civic process. So that's all I'll say about that in terms of the big picture. So thinking about that though, right, led to me to sort of say, in terms of trying to organize our work into work streams or themes, what is there to think about? How do we do that? So, again, administrative and public perspectives, I think, are really material for our work here. Understanding what drives civic experiences for our voters is important. And then I think, some things are really obvious, like, town meeting takes too long. We don't know what to do about that, but it's an issue. And, for those, we need to look at options concretely. And then, so I thought about it in terms of two ways, right? There's, sort of the understanding issues, right? What does town meeting really matter? Right? And what does it mean to be more inclusive, more effective, and more responsive? Understanding what's not working well in town meeting and for whom. And then, again, what do the different ideas entail and what consequences may follow? And then, as we talk about ways to make town meeting better, don't break it, right? Make it good to be there, make it more successful for more people. And, again, make the essential civic processes work better. In my view, in terms of participation, representation, and deliberation. These are sort of the things that went into my thinking about the work streams that I'm going to propose. And those 4 work streams are sort of operational, what happens at the night of town meeting. In my view, how can we explore a more efficient, inclusive experience? A second work stream or theme is communication. How do we, what happens before town meeting? How do we improve people's understanding of what's coming before the town in that period leading up to town meeting after the warrant? A third one is just the civic processes of deliberation, again, leading up to town meeting, but in town meeting, right? How do we understand what town meeting is supposed to do from the perspective of public administration? What's the job of town meeting? And finally, and perhaps most significantly, because it relates to what we don't know, is community engagement, right? How do we understand what makes town meeting a rewarding experience or not for the public? And, the goal is to improve our representation and participation. So this, at a really macro level, is the sort of 4 thematic areas that I see for organizing our work. And I can talk a little more detail about that, but I'm assuming folks have had a chance to read through the slides and already have some comments about this. So let me pause here and begin to ask, how does all that stuff sound?
I guess my initial thought is, I think these make sense. There's so much overlap between these. So I think once we do get into committees, like defining what falls within one camp versus what falls within another will be important for not duplicating work.
Mm-hmm.
And where were you, I go back to what Kristen raised, right? Where do we talk about the efficient and what is inclusive? What do we mean by effective? How are we defining responsive? And not only those 3, I think, but what are the needs and desires of the town? Like, what do we think they are?
Sure.
What's gonna be the process to?
Sure.
Is that like an overarching work stream maybe, perhaps?
I think so, yeah. I think so. I think I expect that we're gonna do a townwide survey, and that's gonna take some work. I would like to see us do a survey of volunteers, people who've worked on boards here. That will also take some work, but it's a different audience. I'd like to see us do some focus groups, talking about different ideas. I think, so I think the engagement process is really gonna take the full year. And, there are gonna be things that are, I think, big asks or, bigger lifts, right? Like the townwide survey. And so there, where if we look across what we're thinking about and we can coordinate our information seeking through that one instrument, we're better off, because we only get a big bite of the apple there.
And I guess.
yeah.
I mean, it's a little bit of a vicious circle, right? Because to me, I agree about communicating, getting feedback,
Yeah.
but starting the work without setting a target.
Mhm.
Uh-huh.
So, for example, just an example, when we say effective, what do we mean? Do we want this to be 80, I guess efficiency, 2 days versus 3 is efficiency versus effective?
Right.
How are we gonna define effective? How are we gonna define inclusive, responsive? Maybe we ought to do that upfront
Mhm.
as a
Sure.
hypothesis.
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
And then
and
we
get
can
some
start working on it
triangulate.
and then try to get some feedback at the same time.
Good.
Just something to think a
Yeah.
little bit about.
Yeah,
Because
that we-
otherwise,
Yeah.
yeah,
now we can use these tools to validate those
Right.
things that we're coming up with, making sure the public agrees that this is what
Exactly.
we're looking for, the approach
Working
we should be
towards.
taking. Yeah, exactly.
set a target for ourselves, or
Mhm.
definitions for these things.
Yeah. That's gonna be our next meeting then.
Yeah.
huh? I mean,
So-
Yeah, good.
And these 4 points could be adjusted after we have that discussion.
Absolutely, absolutely, yeah. This is it called a straw man?
Yes,
Yeah, yeah,
we're still allowed to say that.
yeah.
Straw person, it just sounds.
A mock-up.
Man.
Yes.
Oh, that's right.
Proposal.
Yeah. Um, I'm looking at you, Alice.
I just have one comment. I think one of the things we have to do before I agree, we need to figure out what is our problem, what are we trying to solve? And understand the terms that we're using. But I don't want us to use language at this point that preclude our thinking in any one direction. Like propose ways to make town meeting better, don't break it. Well, maybe it requires breaking.
Uh-huh.
And I don't know what breaking means, but I don't want to make the assumption.
Uh-huh.
Or maybe
Good.
consider breaking to some.
Well, engaging the
You
big
know, we haven't
question of
talked
is
about
it, is
lots of
open town meeting the
solutions.
only answer, or is, because representative town meeting or town council
Yeah.
That's
format?
breaking it, and that
that's
should be on the
breaking,
table.
yeah.
So I was gonna ask a question. I just looked at the charter. It only mentions town meetings.
It doesn't say what.
So the question is, are we gonna be like the US Constitutional Convention, which was originally there to reform the articles and they tossed it?
Yeah.
Do we have the ability to say town council or do we not? I'm looking
Yeah,
at Carmen.
I absolutely do.
Okay.
Your charge says that you could consider everything that's that you should consider everything that's on the list, plus anything else that you think is
So
relevant
maybe I
to
missed
consider.
anything else.
For town
Oh, yeah,
meeting,
no,
which
it's- okay,
includes
yeah.
changing from open town meeting to representative
Yeah.
town meeting, or changing the town meeting form of government. It's certain, you know.
Okay, perfect.
you
I
certainly-
actually want to dissent on that. I
Okay,
mean, we did just have, within the last 5 years, an overview town government structure approach kind of study, and a lot of people put a lot of hours into that. I think of us as town meeting. Now, that includes representative town meeting, I
Yes.
guess. But beyond that, I think there's just so much in what Eric outlined that we could spend years philosophizing, and I am hoping that we will keep our attention on, at a minimum, having 3 or 4 warrant articles or strong suggestions that will be in time to be implemented, at least to be voted on at town meeting next year, so I'm a little bit guarding against things that are important questions and interesting questions. And I'd be glad to talk over coffee separately about that, but not for the focus of our committee
Leslie and
work.
Keith both wanted.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Thank you, Mark.
You're welcome.
Leslie, please.
So I put my hand up a little while ago and the conversation has gotten very interesting. So we got off my point. But one thing I just wanted to mention as someone who is both a Concord citizen and also worked for the town of Concord for 9 years and helped put together town meeting for a number of them, is that one group I think we might want to pull is the actual employees and not, you know, the town manager, although Shannon's viewpoint would probably be very helpful and other people in her role. And also the department heads, like I'd love to get their opinion on what makes town meeting hard for you. But we're not concentrating on that, but how do you think would be better for the citizens to interact with you? And I was very struck by what Keith said about having this one document. That sounded very appealing to me as a citizen and as a former employee. So that
Thank
was
you.
my point.
Thank you. Hi, Keith.
Thanks. I just want to second the comment. First, Leslie, thanks for your comments. And for and for the prior comment on what the scope of our study is. And I do believe that we are studying how to make town meeting better. We are not studying how to make the town of Concord into a city, which is what you do if you have a town council. And we become the city known as the town of, and not have a town meeting anymore. And I don't think we're here to talk about that.
Good, thank you. Good. So, I think the thing I'd like to get out of this, the remainder of this meeting, I think we have identified what we should be talking about next meeting, which is what do we think improvements are? You know, what does effective mean to us? And I think that'll be very interesting. And I agree. I think, you know, identifying, so to speak, what we think our mission really means is good. So I'm still trying to figure out how we're going to work together. And I'm asking you, okay? So, you know, I think in trying to schedule everybody for a single meeting time, it's a bit of a stretch. I think, you know, there's folks who are more flexible in the evening and folks who have more flexibility during the business day. I think that, and thinking about how we're gonna work in parallel, you know, so open meeting law makes it difficult to not work in public, basically. If we're working together on something, basically we need to be in an open meeting together. So that kind of points to having more small meetings with people who can come when they can come, as opposed to having just a few very big meetings where we talk a lot and we meet infrequently, and from my perspective. And so I think that we're getting to the point where it would be good to identify, you know, what you think you're going to start working on and what you think you're going to start working on. And to sort of, again, come back to what's a meeting cadence that can work for the project. And to me, that sounds like there's a bi-weekly evening meeting, which I can lead, and a bi-weekly daytime meeting, which I can also lead. And then we just basically sort of figure out who wants to come and when. As we're making progress, we share. You know, we use the meeting packet to get things into the public channel. And we report out and we discuss. And, you know, certainly over the next 3 months or so, when, you know, so-and-so's over here and you're over there, and we're doing really research intensive stuff, it's great. And then I think, you know, when we're looking at wanting to make a recommendation from the committee, we need a quorum for that. And I'd like to see those recommendations come out with as much of a quorum, as many of us as possible. But again, I don't see us producing any recommendations before September. And then, you know, one after another. So that's how I'm thinking about this. You all, for the most part, have a lot of experience doing this kind of work. What do you suggest in terms of how we proceed forward in terms of organizing our work and collaboration?
Well, you know, I know your slide said subcommittees are really not okay under OML, but I think it's as practical matter, we're not gonna get that much done if we're all working in one gigantic committee. So we have to break it into smaller groups, and I think there are subcommittees that,
Yeah,
that do comply with the open meeting laws, you know, but you could divide us up into groups and each of those subcommittees would be responsible for posting their agendas and doing all the things you have to do to comply with open meeting law. But I just don't think it's practical to have all 9 of us work as a committee of the whole.
agreed, yeah. Yeah, just to be clear, we have to have subcommittees. It's the informal working groups, you know, the 3 of us will get together and work on something that can really get us into trouble with open meeting law. And so really, any collaborative work needs to be in the framework of the subcommittee. So it's the norm and not,
So I would agree. I mean, let's just, if we've got 4 work streams right now, maybe we just divide those and maybe the responsibilities ebb and flow a little bit to the extent that they overlap. And if there's overlap, let the 2 subcommittee chairs kind of work out a joint meeting of the 2 just kind of get the flow started.
Mhm.
Right? Maybe after next week and have the subcommittees report back when they think necessary, when they want to bring the entire committee here.
So just to be clear, right, a subcommittee is under, we need to publish an agenda.
Yes.
It's under
Yep.
open meeting law.
Yep.
It's a meeting.
So,
Yeah,
yeah,
it's
it's a
a meeting,
meeting,
I
it's a
understand,
meeting,
yeah.
so, yeah.
That's why we have Shannon.
I mean, but we can also, and I think so, you know, when we decide kind of what questions we're gonna answer, and then we say, okay, to answer those questions, we need kind of this research and things like that. We can do that independently and bring that back to the subcommittee, so.
Yeah.
I think that going after the, you know, 4 streams that you have
Mhm.
and say, okay, do we have enough to find under each 4 to
Mhm.
go work and then come back?
Right,
And especially with milestones or timelines attached to that, you know, by this time we want to have all the research done or, you know, something like that. So I'd say that's certainly a good place to start.
Mhm.
As long as it doesn't get meeting unwieldy,
right,
as I think is what we
Yeah.
risk happening. So if it was more like, there's a lot of independent work that happens, you know, we bring it back to the bi-weekly meeting and then we say, okay, this is the type of information I have, what's missing? Okay, go back out and get that or something like that.
right.
And the other thing I think is, so when we come back as subcommittees to report, maybe somebody can only stay for a half hour. So
Yeah.
you schedule that subcommittee's report
Right.
for the time they can stay and the person can drop off if they want. So I think if
Mhm.
being flexible with how we organize our larger meetings
Mhm.
might also help.
So I
Yeah.
think, I'm, again, you know, processing, right? I think you see a little bit different structure than I have in mind. I think, I guess my thinking is to just have, you know, bi-weekly cadence of an evening meeting of the committee.
Oh, yeah.
And what we'll have most nights is a quorum. Right? And who's there is, you know, maybe the evening meeting is focused on the operational stuff, right? The
Oh, I
communication
see.
and operations. And maybe the day meeting, you know, which is also in a bi-weekly cadence of the town meeting subcommittee. Also, maybe is focused on what really is good government in town meeting.
Yeah.
And how we're gonna figure out what the survey instrument's gonna be. Right, so there's a difference in
Yes.
the day themes and the night themes, but it's really the town meeting subcommittee. I'm sorry, the town meeting committee.
Yeah.
With, in effect, because we're meeting as a quorum, acting like a subcommittee. So that makes sense.
I think that's gonna be hard to get everybody involved.
You're
I
saying
think.
to get at least 5?
A quorum is 5.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Wait a minute, do the ex officio folks count? or
No.
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 But if we all have to do, if everything gets accomplished by the entire committee, even if it's just 5 out of 9. I think that's gonna make it really hard. It's just
Right.
too many people.
And it may get inconsistent views as people pop in and out
right,
versus if there's a subcommittee of 3 people.
right.
Right, those 3 can say, hey, you know what, let's do Thursday afternoon.
Mm.
They get their job done and then they can report back at one of the day meetings or evenings.
Mhm.
But expecting, I think, folks, if I'm gonna be on operations, for example, and it's
Mhm.
Friday afternoons all the time, it maybe,
Mhm.
yeah, I'm with Phil on this. I think breaking us up
Um,
into subcommittees
Um,
makes.
Karen, I asked about the impacts in your schedule as we have manifold meetings.
Yeah, I mean, obviously for daytime meetings, I think I'm pretty much always gonna be available. right now I'm still assisting the select board, so that's Monday nights. But then I have you guys, the soon to be MCI Concord Committee and Concord 250.
Yes.
So I have a lot, but I just feel like I can pretty much do anything, but I would be bummed about Friday afternoon.
Reasonable.
Unanimous.
Exactly.
Well, if I may, you know, you don't need Shannon for every subcommittee meeting.
Yeah.
either, You know, I mean, if you have a
Right.
subcommittee meeting of 3 people, you have to post it.
And you have to have a location.
You have to have a public location. You
Yeah.
can't do it at somebody's house.
Yeah.
Can't do it in the coffee
Right?
shop.
And you
Yeah.
can't do it in the coffee shop. It has to be a public location. You can do it exclusively on Zoom if you want to.
Yeah.
And post the Zoom link, and someone's gonna take minutes.
Mhm.
But, if you do it on Zoom and Shannon is able to enable the AI.
Yeah, it's always enabled.
It's-
I
it's
press
enabled.
enable every time, so
Right.
it's always enabled, and I'm always gonna be around to post agendas and stuff, because, you know, that's gonna happen during business hours, so I'm always gonna be around to post a meeting agenda, give you a Zoom link.
Right,
whatever.
and then Shannon will be your gatekeeper on public locations that you might wanna use, although Shannon's not in control of all of them. You can, for example, have meetings at the library. And do you talk to the library? The people have to have the library themselves, right? Yeah, so you gotta talk to the library yourself if Fowler or meetings can happen at Fowler, meetings can happen
Library.
at the main library.
I would say town buildings, like departmental buildings, I could do for you guys, like I did here, or I could do Harvey Wheeler if you guys wanted to meet in West Concord, or the townhouse, but I
Right.
feel like the library is just a little bit,
Right,
different.
right. Another place that could be good for subcommittee meetings is the assessor's office. I know yeah, right. I mean, that's a nice, small conference room that the ag committee usually uses for their meetings. You don't want to meet at a school because then you have to pay a janitor.
Mm.
So it needs to be a town building or the libraries.
Who want to meet during the day when school's in session, if they have an empty room?
You need a Cory form.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I think that's probably right.
Okay.
There's
That's
the
We've met with the
administration
school,
building.
we've met with
He's
the
good.
school committee. Some of us met with the school committee.
At the Ripley
Yeah,
administration building.
So
Just a
they may be
conference.
flexible.
You know, it wouldn't hurt to ask them,
Yeah.
but certainly in the evening, you have to pay for a janitor.
Daytime
Yeah.
now, I think they might
Yeah,
be flexible.
yeah, the daytime may be a different story.
Mhm.
But the library has, the main library has 2 or 3 different meeting spaces that are available for the general public. This building has this meeting space and another one upstairs. Harvey Wheeler has got 2.
Is that still around?
Yeah, there's
The
one.
conference room at 138?
Yep, it's still there.
Oh, okay, all right.
Yep.
The
But
light
there's-
plant
there's a
has a
good few
conference room,
options.
which
Yeah.
is very cushy and has a coffee machine.
But
So,
does it have good coffee?
Yeah.
good
Define good.
Nice. So public comment, I think, we'll need to be intentional about that, I think in terms of some hearings.
Yes,
I think, in this meeting, a good comment tonight. There's more interest in comment as well, so, I wanna be sure that as our meeting cadence goes along, we have good opportunities for public participation. I think it might be easy to lose sight of that with a subcommittee meeting. But it just is a thought. Any other comments on how we organize?
no, not about that, other than I imagine we might start out one way and then might iterate a little bit when
Yeah,
we
for sure.
see the workload.
Yeah, for sure.
May I just make a note? To the extent that, research by the committee includes, for example, as Leslie mentioned, a conversation with the senior management team
Mhm.
or, conversations with the school committee, or, you know, if you think about various kind of stakeholders or interest groups in how town meeting, runs, and there will be many different perspectives depending on who you're talking to. League of Women Voters is another group that would have an interest. Parent-teacher groups might have an interest. Then, if you can certainly task an individual to go have a conversation, take notes, and bring that back to a subcommittee or a committee without having to post an agenda or hold an open meeting. That's fine. To the extent you decide you want to go talk to other towns about how they're doing things, to the extent you want to talk to, for example, the Elvis Committee, which is the electronic voting committee in Wayland, and they're behind, they were the first people to do electronic voting in Massachusetts at town meeting, and they are the ones who have the open town meeting special legislation to allow remote voting pending. And they got a great slideshow. They'll talk to anybody, and you can talk to them as a whole committee, or you can task somebody with going to get their PowerPoint in here. So there's a lot of work you can do and report back. And as Eric was talking before, you can work in parallel without getting in any trouble under the open meeting law, or without the open meeting law preventing you from moving forward to gather information that you can then share with the committee and deliberate on it. It's the deliberative process, really, that is protected by the open meeting law, not the information gathering.
And is it consistent with that then, Carmen, that if we wanted to go meet with the Elvis group in Wayland, 3 people could go? It's not a meeting, we're just going essentially as an audience, as a recipient to receive information, and so long as we don't, talk until we get back and have a meeting. It doesn't have to be just one person.
As long as you're not a identified subcommittee as well. So if it's just 3 people, 4 from the whole committee, that sounds like it's okay. If we're a subcommittee of the committee, identified as such.
I'll tell you what, as soon as there's so much gray area on this, I would get advice from the town clerk on that.
But yes, that was my understanding. If you're not deliberating and you're not a quorum.
For example, if you put together a survey or something, or just, educational sessions, one of the, going to training about that, like, there's some conference about town meetings that's being done by the MMA or something like that. You can all go to that. You just don't deliberate while you're there.
Right.
And Keith has his hand up.
Right. So in that sense, if you just go to listen to the presentation and you don't talk to each other, that's not a problem.
Right.
You can also have a party. That's
Just
not-
don't talk.
Just don't
Yeah,
talk
no,
about
talk
you
business.
can- That's a specific party exception under the open meeting law.
Well, there we go. Keith, I want to.
Maybe.
Thanks. First, I feel like I should apologize that I'm not there in the room with you. I'm on Nantucket, where it's 20 degrees cooler. And I was in Concord all last week. I'm on the Cape and Islands this week, but we'll be back for a part of June and for most of the summer. If I'm hearing the conversation, that it looks like we may be headed to up to 4 subcommittees. If that many are needed, operation, communication, deliberation, engagement. And rather than figure out how that should work tonight, I think we might want to authorize the chair to make appointments to those subcommittees. And we could have I would make a motion to that effect. And the way it would be carried out is we give our preferences to the chair, maybe even indicate when we'd want to do available for meetings. Before 7 o'clock is better for me, but I can make it past if need be. And just figure out, see who's interested in working in those 4 areas. Appoint some subcommittees with, you know, 3 or so members, and then we could get going from there.
Thank you.
Yeah, I second Keith's motion. And my only suggested change would be that the appointments not be until after we have the next discussion.
Okay.
We can send our preferences to you now based on the 4 categories as you've outlined, but that might change a little bit.
Okay. I see Prashar and then Katie.
I didn't get the sense that we have a sense that we're gonna go into subcommittees, because Eric, I think you're still thinking
Yeah,
pros
yeah.
and cons, right?
Yeah, I am.
So I guess I would let you consider the pros and cons maybe, and then come back at the next meeting if you want more time.
Uh-huh.
But I would like subcommittees, but it's your project, so.
I think I would benefit, maybe not in the next 30 seconds, but I would benefit by understanding better. I think what the 4 distinct subcommittees, how that would work. And I'm curious to see whether or not there's some overlap. We'll come back to that.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah,
I am also supportive of subcommittees, and I think waiting to define what our goal is and then making assignments seems easier to make assignments than for us to shuffle and volunteer in this group. But I would also suggest if we email you like our interest or whatever, also a preference on how we prefer to meet and when would help.
yeah,
Like, for example, I like including virtual meetings. Virtual meetings would be easier for me if we did an all virtual, so that might be one of my preferences, and happy to
Okay.
work on whatever.
wouldn't accommodate that.
Mhm.
Looking on this side of the table, Eric?
I am part of the consensus for subcommittees. But a separate comment or thought, you talked about how we organize ourselves and how we do meetings and all. And I applaud the notion of hour and a half meetings. Having said that, if I'm already set aside an evening, I'm gonna be there,
Yeah,
the transportation, everything else. I think 7 to 9, I mean, at least giving us 2 hours. An hour and a half right now feels short.
And we're at an hour and a half right now.
yeah.
And we didn't have 20 minutes of public comment.
That's right. Yeah,
How many did we have?
Not many.
couple.
I think you were within your 2 minutes.
One brief question.
David.
So, do we have some time to go a little bit longer tonight?
Sure,
This is important stuff.
yeah, sure.
we good? Okay, so, thank you, everyone. So we know that our next meeting, we're gonna talk about our mission, what we think effective means and participation means and so on. And that following that, discussion, we'll identify where I think, each of us wants to invest our time. And, there's some obvious things, and I think, I hope you sign up for that, but, that makes sense to me. I certainly, as chair, I don't wanna go, you're gonna work on this, I think, this doesn't make sense to me. So I spent some time today working out, what I thought, so these 4 work streams are themes, as it were. They're pretty high level. Within those things, there are topics that are important, I think, to address. I took, the warrant, which I still think was really nicely written, Carmen, thank you. The warrant article, and made sure that we have coverage for all of the things in this list of things to sort of address from the committee. Of course, there's more in it than that. And so at the top level, we see, so what I'm gonna do, I haven't distributed this to the group because I read it this afternoon. It'll go into our minutes, and then I'll also get it out to the group as part of our public record as soon as possible. So we'll see it tomorrow, in other words. But what I did was to say, under this operation, under the topic of scheduling, right, identifying costs and operational issues for different schedule proposals, to me is a task that someone could tackle, right? I think, within the town and within the school operations, people know this stuff, but, you know, if we're gonna talk to, the community about why Saturdays are really awkward, you know, the operational impacts of that, I think we need to sort of, there's a rationale there that we need to communicate. And so even if it's not our decision about what happens on, you know, as a Tuesday or, you know, every Wednesdays for over 3 weeks, I think we need to be able to speak to that. And so that's an instance of kind of a task. Other tasks in this list, this is the table of contents. There's a little bit more verbiage explaining what I mean by this. Other things like, you know, this is a crazy question and goes to, speaks to the prospect of breaking town meeting. What would our warrant deliberation need to be? We had a single session that was 3 hours long for town meeting.
Right.
It's sort of like the COVID town meeting, right?
And Carlisle too, right?
Yeah.
There's this one evening.
Hmm?
Carlisle town meeting is
Yeah.
one evening.
Hmm.
Like a Monday night.
I did, yeah, well,
It is far fewer articles.
right,
Mhm.
so and they tend to have, 2 or 3 meetings a year.
Right,
So it's a little different.
sorry to get off
Lincoln-
topic.
Yeah, Lincoln has one.
One Saturdays
one
all day,
Saturday,
yeah.
and
So
they
we would,
just
we
spend
would
the
kind of,
whole day,
this is
yeah.
an example of what we would examine, right?
Yes,
Perfect.
yes,
Good.
you know, and so, there's a, you know, there's a task here. Do we want to look at representative versus open town meeting? You know, there's arguments pro and con. It's a significant, like Andover spent a chunk of time looking at just that question and then addressed everything else
Mm.
because it was so determinative or
Mhm.
so, you know, I don't know, right? I think, but maybe sooner than later, maybe somebody wants to look at that and say, maybe it's something we do want to tackle or we don't want to tackle. Management of warrant articles, this came out of the article, structure, tasks around, you know, timing and sequencing, citizens petitions. What if citizen petitions were only advisory or symbolic? What would be the effect of that in terms of, so there's a long list of stuff here. It's actually 3 pages of things, but I think I'll distribute this, and then there's a document to follow. I'll distribute this and we can use this to help inform our discussion. There's some, you know, philosophical topics in here as well. So we can use this to inform our discussion about where do we want to invest and what do we think, you know, when we try to understand what representative means or why participation is important, what do we mean by that?
Mhm.
So I'll share that out, and we can run with that. If that's all right. In terms of our next meeting, do you think that we could meet, Tuesday? Next, that's a week from today?
Tuesday, June 4th.
Yeah.
I'm unavailable.
I have a conflict.
I can't put it on my calendar.
But the next Tuesday, the 11th, 2 weeks from tonight.
Yeah, and I actually won't be available then, so that's what I'm thinking. Yeah,
4th works.
okay.
And I can be on the 4th.
So we'll meet on the evening of the 4th and Alice and Eric, I'll figure out a way to get input from you for the committee.
I think that without violating the open meeting law,
Yeah.
that each of them could send a memo with their thoughts to Shannon,
Okay,
who could then give them to you to read to the meeting at the meeting.
okay,
They can't get distributed in advance because then you're deliberating on the stuff.
got it.
Even though no one's talking to them, but they're commenting on what
Right.
you're gonna be deliberating on, so.
Alice, is that acceptable for you?
Yes, I'll do my best to get a memo. I'm
Only
leaving
if you want
town.
Yeah, I know,
So
so,
I'll do the best I can. No guarantee.
okay, but just in terms of missing the meeting on the 4th.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, cool,
I think it'll happen to all of us at some point
Yeah,
during
for
the
sure.
next year.
for sure.
But the next meeting may be important if we're defining what we need by inclusive, responsive.
But you know, yes,
So
yes,
just-
and we're not gonna like cast
Be
that
cast in
broad,
stone, but
exactly.
yeah.
So we're gonna lay it down and then
We can tweak.
we'll put it out and then we'll learn from it. And I know, if I think, yeah,
Yeah, because it would be great to get public comment on it, so we'll
Yeah.
do the draft, so public comment, more comment from us, so it won't be the only opportunity for us to
Okay.
give input, I think.
okay.
So, but the memo that they write would be about the mission. That is, what is our mission based on the charter?
Yeah, thank you for clarifying that. I think, so that the nut of our, I don't have it in front of me here, yeah, do I? The nut of our charter is that we investigate how to make town meeting more inclusive, effective, and responsive to the needs and desires of the town. And so I think, one ask is, what does that mean to you? And so I think, if Alice and Eric and everybody else can give some thought to that and articulate a response to that, then we're beginning in terms of the understanding the mission. And then, battery's running low in a second. Getting it wrong. Oh, well, we're gonna end soon. Love it. And then the other thing is just, where would you like to focus your effort? Where do you think you can make have an impact or contribution? So it's two things, right? What do you think of the mission statement? What does it mean to you? What do you think it means? How should the town see that? And then, where do you want to focus? And then we use it as inputs to how we talk on the floor.
Maybe to make sure we're making a lot of progress next time, maybe we could each come, at least in our heads, with, what each of those items mean and maybe how we measure that item. And that way we have more for discussion and we can make some decisions
Good,
to move forward,
good,
some pre-work.
yeah.
And I'd even stick a straw on the table. I mean, I'm a simple guy. More inclusive means more people. And effective means shorter, better use of our time, efficient. Responsive is a more nuanced, complicated thing.
May I ask a question?
Mhm.
It can be helpful and expansive or burdensome and limiting to look at more studies that other towns have done of their town meetings. I got a collection of them. And if you wish for me to circulate any more of them, there's a couple of them that are in, I think there's three. One's a kind of summary document and that were done fairly well, and there's some more that I can put links to if you think that it would be useful or not. It may be that you'd rather every town's unique, so there's some utility in how other towns have thought about it, and but on the other hand, it's like the question of what language we use to talk about things. Does looking at too many other studies limit your thinking?
I would like to see them myself, speaking as me.
If we had a graduate research assistant to go through them all and summarize them, or AI.
Yeah, maybe AI.
But I think it'd be helpful. It was helpful just hearing about the different towns around here, the Lexington, or the Lincoln,
Lincoln,
Carlisle, Lexington. I don't know how they do. Are they representative?
they're representative, and they go for a lot of nights.
Okay, and then are there towns that are happy with their town meeting? I don't know. But you might know more because you speak to the other moderators, and there might be people who say they love it here, and I don't know, whatever town it is.
Yeah, I think the value in that, seeing those is like making sure we're not just making the same recommendations that all the other towns spent their whole year making. Because I think a lot of them actually are consistent, so it's somewhere to jump from and not just replicate
Yeah,
will be important.
it's especially, just to jump on that, it's especially interesting in looking at the choice to stay with open town meeting. Because Sharon and Andover spent some time on that in particular. Those are good reports, in my view.
One of the things that you find out, I mean, like from the Mass Moderators Association, is our town meeting And everything that we have related to it is so much more advanced and so much more comprehensive. I mean, a huge number of towns look to us as sort of the gold standard. That's on the one hand. On the other hand, there's a bunch that does it in a couple hours, they do it, you know, and they think that well, to the extent they think about us, they would say we just process it to death and make it infinitely more complicated. than it
So
needs to
just
be.
one example, Keith is out on Nantucket. Somebody told me that Nantucket had 128 articles. And they get through it, I think it's 2 days. But they get through 128 articles, if you can imagine that. And the population, the year-round voting population is about the same as.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If I-
small.
Yeah, if I could on that, one of the reasons on Nantucket, they, 112 articles on the warrant this year. 71 of them passed as part of their consent calendar. And actually it's the town meeting themselves that determines which articles are held for debate, and it's not a list brought to them by the moderator. It's called the Call of the Articles. We instituted it in Littleton in 2017, but Nantucket's been doing it for at least 50 years.
It's also, when you
Yeah.
talk about the numbers of articles, we bunch a lot of things, so that we have a town budget that has a bunch of line items. Those could all be individual articles. But they're all, so there's a lot of different ways to do things.
So I
One
feel
of the
like,
things that you realize too, when you attend something like MMA and talk to other select board members, and there's a lot of communities that don't have the traditions of board turnover that we have. For example, you
Yes.
get on,
We
you
have
serve a
turnover.
couple terms, you get off, and there's a highly involved, fairly large population. So, you meet somebody from some community. I've been on the finance committee for 30 years and we didn't change it then and we're not gonna change it now, kind of thing. And, so there's, talk about institutional knowledge, but you really get, there's a lot of my point is that how we do town government in general is reflected in what Eric was referring to around town meeting and the maturity of it and sort of the general professionalism and the level of staff support.
Yeah, I'll just say anecdotally, Stephanie, who does a closed
Yeah.
captioning at town meeting. She told me after the first couple of meetings she did for us that Concord is the first place that she considered charging by the word instead of by the hour.
She got a shout out in
I
the
love
comments on the
that.
survey.
Maybe instead of a time limit, Carmen, you ought to include a word limit.
There you go.
so we're moving towards closing. We still live in happy voters with town meetings, so we have a high bar to get to.
Huh?
Yeah. Well, thank you, everyone. We're gonna meet again on the 4th, 7:30.
7:30 or
30 or 7?
Whoa. Oh,
I want to write this
Seven.
down.
You.
Yeah.
7:05 on the 4th, 7:00 1900 on the 4th, sorry.
Maybe that's. what
And,
it is at the last-
I'll send something out with our list of stuff that we just saw. And, the ask is that we put together a little mission statement and send that to Shannon. And then that'll go into a packet and we'll see that before we meet on the 4th. So we'll close. Does someone need to make a motion to close or can we just close?
We can
I think
close.
you can.
All right, good.
Yeah, you just.
Being a
Move
consent,
to adjourn.
seeing no
I
objection.
second.
All right, great.
Yeah, no,
Then we have to do a roll.
Leslie,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why we don't want to do it.
Oh,
Yeah.
I think he can just
We just
adjourn.
do it.
Eric can just close it.
Oh, okay. Thank you, everyone. We are adjourned.